So there's a huge controversy about this whole issue of trade and making sure that you can supply the market. First of all, the speculators have never, ever, in the 10, 15 years they've been on this mission to try and get the laws around trade in rhino horn changed, they've never, ever done a study internationally on what the size of the market is. Secondly, there are a lot of studies which have been done overseas by independent people. Probably the most famous one is Professor Nadal, and his paper is called Leonardo's Sailors. And that paper is a big, thick, chunky thesis about trade or not to trade. And he's got no axe to grind whether people trade or not. He's looked at it purely from an economic point of view. And he clearly points out that trade can never, ever work to help sustain and protect species in the wild. So the economic processes and studies overseas conclusively prove that this is not the case. But let's look at some numbers. There's a number of studies which have been done by the Department of Environment which show clearly that existing stocks, future mortalities, shavings and all the rest of it can produce anywhere from about 2 tons to maybe 14 tons per year sustainably, depending on the studies. Some studies only say it could be as high as 5 tons. So if we look at the size of the market from what we know in history, we know that between 1978 and 1987, nearly 60,000 rhinos were poached in that period. And if you do the pure sums, it works out at the start of this period, around about 10,000 rhinos were poached in a year. And we think that 1,000 being poached right now is a crisis. That was 10,000 in 1 year. And if we assume an average horn set size today is like 6 to 7 kilograms, but in those days, if you look at all those pictures of the East African black rhinos in particular, the horns were much bigger. And if we assume around about 7 kilograms, that means that there were 70 tons being absorbed by mainly Asian markets per year, 70 tons. And let's assume that we're wrong by 20%. Let's say it's 50 tons. If the market absorbed 50 tons a year and we can only supply 2 or maybe 14 tons, we can never supply enough rhino horn which will flood the market or anywhere near satisfy the market. And once you stimulate demand and it gets to what it was, and remember that is in a poor Asia, now with a much bigger population in Asia and much more affluence, a lot more people who can afford it, and you've got lots more ways to encourage demand through social media, we don't know how big the market can go. And my concern is that if we know it has been 50 tons, and we know that ivory at the moment is over 400 tons a year, where is this going to go? And if we're only supplying between 2 and maybe 14 tons, who is going to make up the shortfall? And the shortfall will come from the international illegal criminal syndicates who are going to exploit that loophole, and they're going to exploit that market opportunity, and they're going to send people across the fences at even bigger numbers. If we think that poaching right now at 1,000 years high, wait. Go and legalize rhino horn, try and flood it, and we will find that there's a poaching tsunami which hits us, and suddenly our rhinos in the wild are going to be under immense threat and possibly led to extinction.
Yeah. And the other thing, Colin, to understand about this is that there's an assumption that the rhino demand is uniform. And what we know about demand and about Asian markets is that products are differentiated both within and between countries. And so consumers are purchasing everything from libation bowls to wine glasses in which people drink tiger bone wine right through to horn. And they purchase for different reasons, and the demand elasticity, in other words, the sensitivity of consumers to changes in price, is something we don't know very much about. What we do know is that at the high end, you have consumers who purchase more as prices rise, precisely because they want to see evidence of the wild product. And so that means that the assumption that farmed horn will flood the market and reduce the price and therefore will have no poaching just seems completely flawed, especially given that poachers get paid a flat rate. And so whether the price is at $35,000 a kilogram or $60,000 a kilogram, the poacher gets paid the same, and it's cheaper to poach than it is to farm. And so I don't care how many tons you have available in your stockpile, the chances that you could flood a market and somehow disincentivize poaching hugely flawed.
And one of the key drivers is that in so many endangered species products, the science is very clear that the market prefers wild products because it's believed to have extra potency. So if the market prefers wild products, in some of these cases now, the buyer demands to see either a rhino ear or some blood to prove that it is wild stocks. And the only way you can have wild stocks is through poaching. So if you've got the consumer wanting wild products and we're supplying farmed products, there's a disconnect. We are putting our rhinos in the wild under immense threat if we go and try and satisfy bogus economic theories put forward by the speculators of rhino horn.